Ladies and gentlemen, this is the portrait of a champion.
The next day we went to Toronto, and they had a ticker tape parade, and you know, I've seen these on television and in movies and things like that, and I guess I never really thought I'd be in a ticker tape parade down the main street of Toronto.
Nancy Greene. In Toronto, they gave her a ticker tape parade, and in Vancouver, they painted the streets green. Nancy Greene the Tiger, Canada's Queen of the Winter Snows. Nancy Greene, Olympic gold medalist, two-time winner of the Women's World Cup, holder of the nation's highest award, the Canada Medal, and appointed Minister Extraordinary in the Cabinet of British Columbia. And just plain Nancy Greene, the determined little girl from Rossland, BC, who skied out of the slopes of her beloved Red Mountain straight into the hearts of an admiring world. And now, Nancy Greene, at the age of 25 and at the peak of her career, has made the agonizing decision to retire from amateur competition. From her victories, Nancy Greene emerged more than just a champion. What was the special mystique that transformed her practically overnight into a front-page idol of the world? The answer simply is Nancy Greene. Through her long, hard grind upward, Nancy remained practically ignored by broadcasters and the press. But after her spectacular victories, cameramen suddenly discovered her elfish grin, and soundmen as quickly became aware that her voice often triggered a tug at the heart. Nancy Greene still reflects on public receptions with the wide-eyed wonder of a small girl. But in matters of public concern, she demonstrates a straight-from-the-hip practical turn of mind.
I really think that the future in this area will be in tourism, because it's got such a beautiful natural setting. It's a little bit unstable for a community to rely on one industry. When people go on strike or something like that, it's just about a catastrophe for the whole area. I think we should develop tourism as a secondary industry here.
In their out-of-the-way home near the foot of Red Mountain at Rossland, BC, Bob and Helen Greene provided the relaxed family surroundings and the love of the outdoors that started the future champion on her way.
Well, I first got skis when I was very young, as I said before. Our whole family skied, and my dad used to take our skis and cut them down sometimes from longer ones. They were just little wood skis, and we skied in rubber boots with homemade harness, things like that. When I was about 4 years old, they built a chairlift on Red Mountain. Now we can get to the top of the mountain without having to climb. And I was skiing from the very top of Red Mountain when I was only about 5 years old.
Determination is a basic ingredient in Nancy Greene. Her first big break came when a last-minute change gave her a spot alongside her sister Elizabeth on the Canadian Olympic team. From that time on, Nancy never looked back. She turned out to be fearless on the most nerve-shaking slopes, and a succession of painful injuries did nothing to hold her back.
Well, the next year, I was on the BC Junior team again, and we went to Ontario, to Collingwood. And again, my sister was first. She was the best skier in the country at that time, the best junior. But I fell, and I got hurt. Well, the next year was the Olympics, and I didn't get hurt that year. But the year after, in 1961, I broke my leg at Sun Valley.
At Portillo, Chile, in the summer of '66, Nancy's skiing career came very nearly to an end, when a bone-shattering somersault terminated in a slamming crash into a wall.
Well, I was pretty banged up, mostly just bruised, and I tore ligaments in my elbow, which has bothered me a bit since then. I get a sore elbow if I play tennis and things like that, but it's nothing serious. And I broke my tailbone, which again wasn't too serious. I was skiing 4 days later in the giant slalom, so I was pretty lucky. I was lucky, I guess, that I didn't break a bone, really.
In the breakneck pace of championship racing, injuries are an ever-present hazard. Nancy's 1968 Olympic chances at Grenoble were temporarily at stake after a fall on a practice run.
Yes, in the third race of the year at Bad Gastein, Austria, we had a downhill there, and it was the first downhill of the year for us. One had been canceled by snow, and our downhill training at Rossland had been canceled due to lack of snow. And so I was very keen in training on this downhill. It was good, and we looked at it one day, and the next day we went up for our first non-stop run. And I just didn't use my head because I really got carried away. The snow was fast and the course was good, and I hit the first few turns well, and I just crouched, and I was going fast, not too fast, but perhaps because I hadn't had much training in downhill, I misjudged something. Anyway, I caught an edge on a catwalk, and I went off the bank and hooked up in a bush, or sort of like these alder bushes that grow out of the sides of the catwalks. And I twisted my ankle quite badly. I did go and have it x-rayed, and the first doctor I went to said that there was a crack. And I told her, and Vern Anderson, my coach, told her not to say anything to anybody. But some reporter phoned, and she told them that I'd broken my ankle. And this is why the story got back home. Meanwhile, we'd jumped on a train and gone 20 miles down the road to a better hospital, and found out that it was just pulled ligaments, and it would take a couple of weeks of rest and of exercise to get it back in shape.
One of Nancy Greene's greatest assets is her no-nonsense attitude towards success. Her early wins were accepted with no illusions, and failures only strengthened her unshakable determination to win.
In 1965, the biggest race of the year was the U.S. National Championships at Crystal Mountain, and we were competing against not only the American team, but also the top Europeans. And again, I got very lucky. I think I could call that luck, and I won that race, and that made me the top woman skier in North America. The next winter we went to Europe, and I won several big races there. So that summer we had the World Championships in South America. You know, it's winter there when we have our summer. And of course I was one of the favorites in this race, but I didn't perform very well. I fell in 2 of the races where I had a good chance, and then I didn't do well in the 3rd one. So that made me a little bit discouraged, but all the same, it made me more determined than ever to do well this year. So this year we went over to Europe again, and I started off the season with 5 wins right off the bat. So after the Canadian Championships, we went to Eastern States for a race, and then went to Colorado and won at Jackson Hole. Now, I didn't do too well in the first 2 of those races, and so it wound up that at Jackson Hole, Wyoming, the last race of the year, going into that race, I was very, very close. If I won the race, I would win the World Cup. And if anyone else won the race, my rival from France, Marielle Goichel, would have won the cup. The first run of the race was very exciting. It was a slalom. And after the first run, I was in 2nd place. A young girl from France had a very fast run, and she was ahead of me. But she was only ahead of me by 0.05 of a second. Going into the 2nd run, I knew that I had to win. Also, right behind me was Marielle. She was about 0.05 of a second behind me, so it was very, very close. Of course, going into the 2nd run, I normally would have been very, very nervous, but somehow I wasn't nervous at all. I think maybe it was the good old spirit of Red Mountain coming through. Anyway, I ran that 2nd run, and I skied probably the best I've ever skied, and I wound up beating Marielle Goichel by a total of 0.07 of a second, and I won the World Cup.
Nancy always displayed a great concern for the welfare of the team. Distracting public relations tours were always cheerfully performed, despite the knowledge that her own chances of winning might suffer.
I had to go on quite a few public relations trips last fall, and I was a little bit worried that I wasn't in good shape, but it seemed that things were going quite well. It's funny, last year after winning the World Cup by such a small margin, I knew that I really had to work extra hard to do it again and to stay on top. It's quite a different situation when you go into the first few races, being a favorite rather than being somewhat of an underdog as I was the year before. Yes, it was a pressure, and I don't know whether it really affected me or not, but I do know that I came 3rd in the first 2 races, and the year before I had won them. And I certainly wasn't too happy with the way I was skiing slalom. The 2nd race of the year I was disqualified in the slalom after having 2 very poor runs. I did win the giant slalom and was back in form in giant slalom. And we had so much snow over there that the downhill was canceled. So I felt, after 2 races in Europe, I felt quite confident in giant slalom, but not very good in the slalom.
Nancy's injury at Grenoble was only one of the discouraging setbacks that plagued this great competitor's peace of mind.
It never did hurt very much to walk on it, and I really thought that it wouldn't be too bad, but when I started skiing it was pretty painful and quite sore, and the only event that it didn't really bother me in was downhill, and the first race I went in was a downhill, and I was all set to do quite well in it. Then the night before the race it snowed, and I had number 1, and it was still snowing, and there was about 6 inches of fresh snow in front of my skis, and we missed the wax, and it's the worst race I've ever had in my whole career. I was 25th in the downhill. That's 4 places back of my 1960 Olympic results.
When asked if this shook her confidence, Nancy had this to say.
Really, because I knew that it was just the circumstances of the race. And the next big event, of course, was the Olympics. And when we went there and we started training for the Olympic downhill, I was very confident.
Success for Nancy Greene was not always assured. Bitter disappointments more than once were her lot. But to Nancy Greene the Tiger, a loss only rekindled the determination to win.
But in general, I liked the course, and I was doing well on it. But then in the race, it didn't go so well. Well, I think the event probably that I wanted to win the most was the downhill. And this is where I had my biggest disappointment. In fact, I would say that was the low point of my whole career, because after training well on it and having very good times in training, in fact, in the non-stop the day before, I had the best time. Of course, this is unofficial and it doesn't count anything. But the day of the race, we misjudged the wax, and we misjudged the way we put the wax on our skis. And then I misjudged my line on the race. I mean, on the course, I should have taken a tighter line because the course was slower that day. And anyway, I wound up 10th, and it was a bitter pill to take. I had to go to the prize giving that afternoon for the World Championships to accept a little medal or something for 10th place, and I was very disappointed. In fact, I was a very poor loser, but I was determined to do better. And in the slalom, I wasn't completely confident in it. I hadn't had a good run of slalom all year up to that point. And after the first run, I was quite far behind, and I was still in 5th place, and then they took a few disqualifications out, and I think it put me into 3rd or 4th place. And so I was amazed that having a run that I knew was quite poor, that I had done so well. So then the next run, I just decided that I was going to go all out and either make it or break it, so to speak. Judy Noggle, a young 16-year-old from the States who had been leading after the first run, fell. She did something very similar to what I did in Portillo 2 years ago. And so that then I knew I had a good chance anyway for a medal and maybe to win it. So I went and I had a very good run, and I lost. I was second by 29 hundredths or something. It was pretty close. So after that, I was quite pleased with the way I'd skied and the way I had performed, really.
Nancy's big win at Grenoble points up her built-in self-discipline and her ability to relax.
The morning of the race, and looked at the course, Vern and myself, and after we'd studied the course for about an hour and a half, we went back up to the top of the mountain to the little restaurant on top and had a cup of tea, and John Platt came along, and Vern and John and I sat down there. This was about 3/4 of an hour before the Olympics, and discussed the national ski team and the program and junior development in Canada and all kinds of things. And we just got completely lost in the conversation about skiing. And before we knew it, I had 15 minutes left. I had to run out, put my skis on, ski down to the start, and I was really completely relaxed for the race. And I think I skied the best run of my life. Well, I think it depends on how confident you are. You see, for the giant slalom, I was confident. I had won, I think, about 12 giant slaloms in the previous year and a half, and I knew that I could. I knew that the odds were that I would win it, and that if I didn't win it, something would have been wrong. And so I didn't worry about how I was going to do. I just sort of went and did it. Whereas for the other races, there's a little bit more tension on me because I haven't done quite as well in them. And in retrospect, I think the other events are maybe a little more satisfying to me. Actually, one of the things that was the most satisfying to me was that the week after the Olympics, we went to Chamonix, France, for the Arlberg-Kandahar, which is the oldest ski race in existence. And it's a downhill and a slalom, and it's really one of the most prestigious races. And it was a very difficult downhill, and I went in that, and I won it. Crystal Haas was right behind me by a couple of tenths, but the two of us were over 3 seconds ahead of the rest of the field. So I felt almost as though I had a little bit of revenge after losing the Olympics.
Throughout all her successes, Nancy Greene has remained unspoiled. A mark of this great champion is her true sense of humility and the genuine appreciation with which she accepts public acclaim, as when in 1967 in her hometown of Rossland, they made her a freeman of the city.
After these Des Moines races, I came home to Rossland for the Canadian Championships, and that was a wonderful day for me. The people honored me in a way that made me very, very proud to be from Rossland. They gave me the freedom of the city.
This same virtue was in evidence in 1968 after Grenoble, when Nancy Greene Days sprung up across the land.
The next day we went to Toronto, and they had a ticker tape parade, and you know, I've seen these on television and in movies and things like that, and I guess I never really thought I'd be in a ticker tape parade down the main street of Toronto. And we went to the city hall, and there were thousands of people there. Someone said there were 100,000 people there, and everybody was cheering and singing, and oh, it was just great. Then, of course, we came back, and by this time I was pretty tired. I had phoned home, and Mom and Dad had said that the people here wanted to plan a reception for me too, but they had decided that I was probably going to be worn out, and so they would give me an official 2 days of rest. And so I came home, and I think I slept for the 2 complete days. And I think perhaps of all the things throughout the whole winter, I really appreciated this little rest, because by this time I was getting a little tired. Then, of course, we went down to Vancouver, and they had the Nancy Greene Day there with the street painted green and everything else. And from there we flew down. The Western Airlines flew Karen Daka and myself, no, Judy Lineweber and myself down to Seattle for the U.S. National Championships in a big DC-3 all by ourselves. It was really quite something. Actually, the whole thing was very spontaneous. None of these events were planned more than 2 days ahead of time, and I think the whole feeling was spontaneous, and I was really impressed by the way people, you know, they were so happy that I had won. But by this time I was pretty tired, and I had a bad cold, and I didn't perform well at the U.S. Nationals.
After Grenoble, Nancy Greene reached her big decision to retire.
I really was. We went to Aspen, Colorado for the first of the North American series of the World Cup races, and it was good to get back. And I'd shaken my cold by this time, and I was back skiing, and we had terrific weather. And I probably had the best weekend of racing I've ever had. I won all 3 races by quite a large margin. And then we went to the international team race at Sun Valley, and I did the same thing again. I won all 3 events. It was sort of funny, after winning so many races in a row in the international races. I had won, I think, 9 races in a row, starting from the Olympics and then Chamonix and Aspen and Sun Valley. And everybody was sort of saying, come on, when are you going to lose one? And sort of razzing me and hardly even really congratulating me, just saying, well, that's what we expected, you know, who came second sort of thing. And it made me think a little bit, and I had been thinking really ever since winning at Chamonix and at the Olympics about when I was going to stop racing. And I realized that although I liked it and I loved the actual racing, that the winning itself didn't mean as much anymore. Perhaps it was just sort of a holding on, and it certainly was nowhere near the excitement and the feeling of achievement that came with the first few times I've won, and some of the races that I was in last year. And so just before I came home, when we stopped in Spokane, I announced on the television there that I was going to retire after this year's World Cup races.
Pride and affection for Red Mountain has always been strong in Nancy Greene. The chance to tie down her second World Cup on her home hill came as a dream fulfilled.
I think that's one reason why I said in Spokane that I was retiring, was so that people would realize that this was going to be one of my last races. We're all a little bit hams at heart and like to show off a little bit, and it certainly is great to be home where everybody knows you, and it's a funny feeling. I think there might be even some tension involved because you want to do your best, but on the other hand, everywhere you turn somebody's wishing you well, and it's just terrific. I've had a funny sort of career racing at home. I remember after the 1964 Olympics I came back and raced in the War Eagle, and I fell before I got to the first gate. But I wasn't thinking about this for the Des Moines this year. And when I caught a tip in the slalom, it was just one of those things, catching a tip. And, you know, can't win them all.
Her disappointing fall in the first race at Rossland again created that all-out determination to win.
Yes, especially after falling the day before, because I really did want to win for the people around here. And it was a terrific race, and I would have been very unhappy if I hadn't won that giant slalom. Actually, the Des Moines race in Rossland was, in my opinion, the best race of the whole season, and I think that most of the racers will agree with me on this point. From the racer standpoint, it was just terrific. It was so well organized. The courses were excellent. The hill conditions were hard and icy, which is ideal for racing, and the hospitality that the people showed to the visitors was something that doesn't usually happen. And all the Europeans they just had the time of their lives here, and they all want to come back. And throughout the whole rest of the season, they just kept remarking about how good a time they'd had, and thank them for us and things like this. The organizing committee did a fantastic job. They really did. It was a better run race than the Olympics. The Longines timing men who have traveled the whole circuit this year and have been at every race said that it was the best run race they'd ever been at. I better not even start naming, because everybody, I think there were about 500 people or more that worked on this race. And oh gee, I was so happy and so proud to be from Rossland, because it was just great.
Nancy's concern is for the young skiers, and she is never too busy to instruct the idolizing group that flocks at her heels on her home slopes of Red Mountain.
Well, I think it has really inspired the young kids around here too. They saw the best in the world on their own mountain. They saw me capture the World Cup there, and Jean-Claude Keely as well. And I think that I hope that they will be inspired by this, and we'll have some future champions from here.
Nancy's affection for her hometown of Rossland is revealed in her comments on the World Cup parade.
Oh gosh, it was amazing. It really was. I couldn't believe all the people there. The whole street was just full of people. I was a little bit disappointed that most of the other racers weren't there, because they hadn't. I don't know. There was some slip up in this thing, and maybe some of their coaches felt it would be too much for them or something. And anyway, some of them were there, but not everybody was, and it's too bad, because that was the best parade I've ever seen.
And here is a description of the Queen's centennial dinner at Ottawa, as only Nancy can give it.
Oh gosh, that was tremendous. The whole thing was so elegant and so regal, and everybody was so kind, and I sat next to the Prime Minister, and between the Prime Minister and Prince Philip, and they were both wonderful. I really enjoyed it. And I've just come back. My mother and I were just in Ottawa again, where I was awarded the Order of Canada Service Medal, and it was the same type of an affair, really exciting. And we met Prime Minister Trudeau.
When Nancy Greene retired, her championship equipment went without question to the ski section of Rossland's Centennial Museum. An item of interest is her crash helmet.
My helmet, this particular helmet I got in 1965, and Ron Williams was a member of the team then, and he started painting our nicknames on the side and a maple leaf on the front. And when it came time to put a nickname on my helmet, I didn't know what to put. I didn't really have a nickname, but a few people had called me Tiger. Not, it wasn't really a personal nickname, and it still isn't. So I decided that it'd be a good psychological weapon, so I put it on my helmet. And it was from then on that the press and international press started calling me Tiger, because it was on my helmet.
A colorful display of her tie-on racing numbers also has a story.
Yes, I've saved quite a few race numbers over the last couple of years, and I've always tried to save the ones that meant the most to me. I've got numbers from Squaw Valley and Innsbruck and Jackson Hole, Grenoble, various places that were really high points in my racing. Number 26 here from Crystal Mountain, Washington, was a training number, but that was the meet that I sort of broke through the barrier and beat everybody at that race. Well, there's a race number there, number 1 from Portillo, Chile, for the FIS, the summer of 1966. This was my downhill number, and if you look closely, you can see some of the blood where I hit the wall and got a nosebleed and a few other things. Gory.
Included in the collection are Nancy's first good pair of skis.
Yes, Jack. These are the first good skis I had, the first time I had a pair of racing skis. The Kesley skis at that time were the best wooden skis you could buy for slalom and giant slalom, and I got these for Christmas of 1958. It was a great thrill for me. I think I even took them to bed with me that first night, and so I used these. Really, I only used them for one season because the following year I was chosen for the Olympic team trials, and we had further equipment given to us at that time.
And Nancy has some more to say about her racing numbers.
Yes, in Portillo we all stayed at the same hotel, and all the competitors and everybody was mixing with each other. This was a terrific meet for this reason. For instance, last winter at Grenoble, we didn't really see the other racers at all because we were in different buildings according to your language. But in Portillo, everybody mixed, and we all got each other's autographs and things like this. And you can see there are various autographs on the number of Marielle Goichel, Keeley, and some of the others. My 2 numbers from Grenoble for the number 2, which I wore in the slalom, and number 9, which I wore in the giant slalom, are there. Number 13, which I wore in the final slalom of the 1967 World Cup at Jackson Hole, is there. That's a lucky number. Number 5 from Chamonix, which was the number I wore in the downhill at Chamonix this year for the Arlberg Kandahar. It's also there. Let's see, what else do we have? Oh, number 1 from the De Maurier International at Rossland. That was my giant slalom number.
The very familiar national ski team sweater is also part of the display.
Of course, this is a very familiar sweater to people around here. This is the national team sweater. It was designed by the team members. We decided that this was the design we wanted to, and it's manufactured here in Canada, in Montreal, I believe. One thing that came up with regards to this sweater was that it was copied, apparently, by a Japanese company, and a Canadian importer had planned to import these into Canada and sell them sort of on the open market. And we managed to push through a copyright on the design in a matter of days with the help of some people in the government, and we were able to stop this sort of copy from being distributed. The sweater has really meant a lot to us. It was first used in the World Championships in Portillo, and we've used it, the team's used it ever since then, and it's just something that we really feel strongly about. Nobody's ever traded their sweater or given it away or lost it or anything. We're really fussy. I don't think you'll ever see anybody but a member of the national team wearing it. The team decided this year that they would let me keep my number when I retired from, my sweater when I retired from the team. But usually we ask if it's a team member that was maybe only on the team for a year and then decided that they didn't like it or they didn't make the team again, then he would be asked to give his sweater back so that it's kept current and up to date, and it's only team members that can wear it.
An eye-catcher in the Nancy Greene display is a large life-size photo mural.
Oh, this picture arrived in the mail, compliments of a European company. I couldn't believe the size of it. It's a huge enlargement, and of course we don't have any place at home to hang it on the wall, and I don't particularly like looking at pictures of myself anyway, so I gave it to the museum, and it's of myself and Annie Famos and Fernand Beauchaté on the podium at Grenoble when the medals were given out. It's amazing because of its size, really.
And now, Nancy Greene, before taking her leave, reaffirms her faith in Red Mountain, her home hill.
I really believe in the future of Red Mountain and Granite Mountain. It's one of the best areas I've ever seen. I've skied all over, and there really aren't too many places that can compare with it as far as the actual hill and the snow conditions, the weather conditions, and The uphill facilities now are excellent too. It's through Red Mountain and now Granite Mountain that, well, really that I got my start skiing, and that most of us are getting a lot of our training. And not only has it produced me, but if you look back over the last few years, there have been a lot of other terrific racers coming out of Red Mountain.
You have been listening to a portrait of Canada's Queen of the Ski Slopes, Nancy Greene the Tiger from Rossland, BC. This is Jack McDonald at Rossland.